What if the world decided to build a giant canal across northern Oman to replace the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow route now under growing military and geopolitical pressure? On a map, it looks almost seductive. One bold line, one giant shortcut, one project that seems like it could free global trade from one of its biggest vulnerabilities. And that is exactly why this idea keeps exploding online. Because Hormuz may look small on a map, but nearly 20% of the world's oil trade moves through it. So every time that passage is disrupted, the effects ripple far beyond the Gulf. So why hasn't the world built an escape route? To see why this idea keeps coming back, you have to look at the map a little differently. The Persian Gulf is almost like a giant enclosed export basin. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE sit inside it, and for a huge share of their oil and trade, the Strait of Hormuz is the main way out. That is what makes this narrow waterway so dangerous. If Hormuz gets choked off, the shock does not stop at oil prices. It also hits the wider supply chain, because this is not just an energy route. It is one of the most important shipping lanes connecting the Gulf to the rest of the world. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have already built bypass pipelines to reduce some of the risk, but even at full capacity, those lines can handle only a fraction of what normally moves through Hormuz. And more importantly, pipelines solve only one part of the problem: oil. They cannot carry containers, machinery, electronics, vehicles, or the rest of the cargo that moves through Gulf shipping lanes every day. So even with those bypass routes in place, Hormuz still cannot be truly replaced. So if pipelines can't truly replace Hormuz, what would? Take a look at the northernmost tip of Oman. There's a jagged limestone peninsula called Musandam, jutting straight into the sea, standing like a natural fortress right at the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz. With a layout like that, it's the kind of thing that makes everyone think, wait, why not just dig a straight line through that narrow strip of land, just like we did with the Panama Canal? Imagine if supertankers didn't have to hold their breath while squeezing through the bottleneck of Hormuz, with all its warships and geopolitical tension. Instead, they could simply cruise through a massive open ocean shortcut. This wouldn't just be an emergency exit, it would be a true maritime highway. Estimates suggest this canal could shave 12 to 18 hours off a single trip. In the shipping world, time is literal cash. This route could save companies tens of thousands of dollars in fuel on every journey. On paper, this sounds like a huge win that would make everyone a ton of money. But once engineers actually got their boots on the ground, they realized the terrain tells a completely different story, and it's anything but a simple fix. Think the Musandam Peninsula is just flat, easy-to-dig desert sand? Think again. It's actually part of the Hajar Mountains, featuring jagged limestone cliffs that shoot straight up from the sea, some twice as tall as the Burj Khalifa. Building a canal here isn't about shoveling sand. It's about trying to split a massive mountain range in half. The problem is that supertankers, VLCCs, are absolute sea monsters, hundreds of meters long. For these giants to pass each other safely, the canal would need to be at least 500 meters wide and 20 meters deep. Given the steep, rocky terrain, the sheer amount of earth and stone that would need to be moved is staggering far beyond what traditional digging methods can handle. In fact, engineers once considered a plan that sounds like science fiction: nuclear bombs. They dusted off a crazy Cold War-era file called Atoms for Peace, proposing the use of atomic blasts to literally blow the mountains apart and create a channel in an instant. While that sounds fast, the cost would be tens of millions of tons of pulverized rock and an entire ecosystem wiped off the map. It would be an environmental catastrophe that no amount of money could fix. Speaking of money, the price tag for this massive project could hit $200 billion. To put that in perspective, the huge expansion of the Panama Canal only cost about $5 billion. That means building this canal would be 40 times more expensive than Panama. But keep in mind, these engineering hurdles and the bottomless pit of cash are only half the battle. Even if the engineering mess gets cleaned up, there's a much scarier monster waiting: geopolitics. And this is where the story turns into a high-stakes thriller. Look at the reality for Oman. The Omani government is trying to turn Musandam Peninsula into a luxury tourism paradise. They aren't exactly thrilled about literally splitting their own country in half just to make their neighbors richer. Then there is the looming shadow of Iran. Right next door, hidden deep under coastal cliffs, Tehran operates missile cities, massive underground bunker networks packed with thousands of missiles and drones, all locked on to the water. Digging a canal through Oman is basically a loud public attempt to move global oil out of Iran's reach, because then the situation gets even worse. Iran isn't going to sit back and watch their biggest trump card get taken away. In fact, this canal could be the exact spark that sets off a massive regional war. On top of that, building this canal might simply trade one nightmare for another. Instead of relying on the natural chaos of Hormuz, the world would be placing everything on a single man-made lane. And this is where the map stops being useful. We all saw what happened in 2021, when the Ever Given got stuck and paralyzed the Suez Canal for days. In a place this tense, one ship getting wedged in or one well-placed strike could cause the entire global system to collapse instantly. All these barriers are why the dream of the Musandam Canal remains exactly that, just a drawing on a map. And yet, the idea never really goes away. Every time tensions flare around Hormuz, the same question starts bouncing around again. Why not just build the Musandam Canal? Online, people bring it up like the answer is obvious, as if the world could approve it tomorrow, send in the machines next week, and finally break free from this choke point for good. That is part of what makes the idea so seductive. On a map, it looks like one clean cut through the rock could solve a global problem. And to be fair, history has a way of making impossible projects look inevitable after the fact. There was a time when carving through Suez sounded absurd. There was a time when Panama looked like madness. Maybe that is why Musandam keeps haunting the conversation. Not because it is easy, but because the world keeps wishing there was a simple escape from Hormuz. So if the canal remains a fantasy for now, what does that say about the future of global trade? Because it reveals a harsh reality. The entire global economy is at the mercy of a few tiny spots on a map. One narrow strait. If they get blocked, gas prices skyrocket. Supermarket shelves go empty, and the world economy starts shaking. The Musandam dream is basically an ambitious attempt to hack the planet's layout. But while the mountain rocks are stubborn, the politics behind them are even tougher to break. I have a question for you. Is $200 billion worth the gamble to get rid of the fear of Hormuz forever? Drop a comment below, dig it, or leave it alone. If you want to hear about an even crazier plan proposed to replace the Strait of Hormuz, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Part 2 is coming your way soon.